Hey gang, David Michael Phelps here. As you know, Working Man is the podcast of Harmel Academy of the Trades. Now, several years ago, when our co-founders Brian Black and Ryan Pohl began to search for models of a residential trade school, they were able to find only one, Williamson College of the Trades, just outside Philadelphia. Williamson is a residential trades college for young men, and while it isn't a Catholic or a Christian school per se, it was founded by a Quaker businessman over a century ago and holds faith as one of its core values alongside integrity, diligence, excellence, and service. Williamson provides a superb trades education and truly forms its students to be men of character and skill, men that are highly sought after by businesses across the country. It was clear there was a lot about Williamson that could serve as a model for us at Harmel Academy. And when Brian and Ryan visited their campus, they were welcomed with open arms by Williamson's president, Michael Rounds. Mike is a husband, a father, a Catholic, and he came to Williamson College of the Trades after a career in the Army Corps of Engineers. Since that initial visit, Mike's become an advocate, a mentor, and a friend of Harmel Academy, and he is our guest today on Working Man. So, without further ado, here is my chat with Michael Rounds.
I'm Mike Rounds, and I'm the president of Williamson College of the Trades out here in Media, Pennsylvania, which is about 30 miles just outside of Philadelphia, just to the west of Philadelphia. It's my seventh year here, and prior to that, I had a full career in the Army as an officer, and had a pretty diverse career. And I'm a licensed professional engineer. I had some good experience in those areas, but I also really loved teaching, and I loved working with the cadets and as at the prep school. And a headhunter called me, and he called and he said, "Hey, I've got this school. It's out by Philly. It's unique in the country. I've done a search for their last two presidents. They were both colonels retired from the Air Force, and it's run like a military school." And one of the things that I told him is that I would be very interested in a Catholic school. I said I would love. I think the Catholic faith's a big part of my life, and I could really see myself fitting in there. He said it's not a Catholic school, but it was faith is a core value. It was founded by a Quaker, and they go to chapel every day. And so it has that faith element that I know you're interested in. And so I said, well, I hadn't really thought much about a trade school. I was kind of thinking, different than that. But as an engineer and construction and those kind of things, I went out and visited, and I came back and told my wife. I said, wow, there's something really special about that place. I said, those kids are inspiring. So I said, if I could get a job like that when I retire from the Army, that would be my dream job. Luckily, I guess the field was weak. They selected me. So I said, hey, come be our president. And so I retired from the Army in 2013 after 25 years and came that summer out to Williamson to be the president. And so we love being here because I just feel that there's something really special happening here with the young men that come through this program. Part of it, and a big part of that, is the faith part of it. This school was founded by a Quaker who, in 1888, as 85 years old, he was an interesting guy, one of the wealthiest guys in Philadelphia, but never spent any money on himself. Literally lived like in a hovel, threadbare clothes. I think a lot of people at the time thought he was kind of like a Mr. Scrooge, but after he passed away, they realized that he had the secret code. He had given away millions of dollars to orphanages and to hospitals and to all kinds of charities around Philadelphia. But at 85 years old, he said, I see these poor young men in the streets with no future, no chance in life. And I want to build a school free of charge. They can live here. They can learn a trade. And they can become useful and respected members of society. And as a Quaker in the 1800s, they were Christians, Bible-based Christians, and that had always been part of the program, is moral and religious development. It's right in the deed of trust. He passed away 3 months after he wrote the deed of trust, and he left $1 million to build the school and $1 million to endow it. $1 million in 1889 is a lot. It's just probably like $70 million today. So the endowment was there to fund the school. One of the most famous American architects, Frank Furness, was the guy who won the bid. And our campus is, currently in the process of becoming part of the National Historic Register. It's the largest collection of original Furness architecture anywhere. It's a beautiful campus. So the first students showed up in 1890. Many of them were orphans, and many of them were 15, 16-year-old, literally off the street kids. The things that Mr. Williamson thought were important, right, that are right in the deed of trust, that include, our core values are faith, integrity, diligence, excellence, and service. And those are the things that we look for in young men that come. So the students go through here. They graduate with an associate degree and no debt. But it's not an easy place. Our rules are strict. It's like a military school. Probably the reason why we've had 3 presidents in a row that are former military guys. So they're up at 6 a.m. Their dorm rooms are pretty Spartan, right? They got to make their bed. They got to clean the common areas. They got to be at the lineup pad at 7:15 when the flag goes up. We play reveille. We stand at attention, and they get inspected by the officer of the day. Right? So the officer of the day is looking for them to have shaved. They wear coat and tie. Now, if you're a couple seconds late to lineup, that means you just lost 4 hours of your Saturday. So you got to be on time. You got to do what you're supposed to do. You got to be accountable in a very much of a military type model of accountability and leader development. The seniors in the shops are leading the freshmen. They're teaching the freshmen, mentoring the freshmen, holding them accountable, which is another part of their leadership development, which we have a full-blown leadership program that starts on the very first day the freshmen come in all the way through their senior year. So we also have a zero tolerance policy for drugs and alcohol. So one strike at any point, you're out. If you're a senior, rising senior in the summer down at the Jersey Shore, and you're underage drinking and you get cited, you're gone. There's no second chances. So we tell them up front, like, guys, this is, it's a high bar. But here's the beauty of Williamson, like, everybody's here for your success. So you live here in dorms of 24 guys that have a live-in dorm parent that lives there with them, the dorm manager. And it's a residential campus. We have usually over 300 plus, usually closer to 400 qualified applicants that want to come here. And we only have room to bring in 100. So we interview them, make sure they're a good fit, that they know what they're getting into, that they're confident they can do what they need to do. And then basically how we pare 400 down to 100 is who has the most financial need. But what these kids really need is a place to develop the confidence and the skills that they need to be successful. Part of that is what we say is faith is a core value, and we go to chapel every day. And just like every other thing that's here, it's not optional. So, we're not proselytizing. However, the leadership and the board of the school feel this is an important part of what Williamson is. So you don't ever have to stand up and say, I believe X, Y, and Z, but you better be in your seat when chapel starts at 7:30. Right? You're required to be there. So it's really a cool part of the program. Like, where else do you get to go to school where every day you come up and spend 15 minutes in chapel, reading Old Testament, New Testament reading, bringing in guest speakers, and just kind of sharing the faith with these kids, all these things. We have intercollegiate athletics. We expect that if you're not a part of an intercollegiate athletic team, you're going to do intramurals, health and wellness. It's all part of the whole person development thing that we do here. The best part of it really is there's a lot of great parts of it. I mean, I get emotional sometimes when I see kids coming across the stage that I knew were living in a car before they came here. And when they come in as students, as high school students and kids that, what we find is they don't have a lot of confidence a lot of times. If they're at that income level we're talking about, sometimes they don't have great support around them. They don't have great role models around them. But also, when they've been at school, they go to their counselor and they say, yeah, I'm not that really interested in philosophy and European history and writing essays. Like, I like to work with wood. I like to work with my hands. Oh, you're a VOTEC kid. And for a lot of schools, they don't feel respected. That's not valued. A lot of schools, it's the idea is that you're there as a counselor to convince this kid that they got to go on to 4-year college when they graduate from their school, right? And they think they're helping them. And it's important for a lot of kids to do that. That's a great step for a lot of kids, but not every kid. And if you are somebody that's gifted and talented in using your hands and isn't that interested in those things, it doesn't mean you're dumb. It means you have different skills and talents, and you shouldn't feel bad about the fact that you're not interested in moving on to a 4-year college, right? And so that's some of the challenge. So they come here and they see people that value the skills and the interests that they have. And then they live in this challenging lifestyle where it's with all these other guys that are also coming together to work through a tough experience. And one of the most inspiring things too is to see who wouldn't want to hire these kids, right? They're in huge demand. 10 plus years ago, we said we have so many companies that want to hire these kids that we We are not going to send kids out every day to go to job interviews. We're going to host 2 career fairs a year here in our gymnasium. And if you're a company and you want to hire our kids, you come to us. And over the years, it's developed and grown. And the last few years, we have to turn companies away. So last year, we had, I think, 180 plus companies from 20 different states to hire one of our 75 graduates. And so it's not only that you graduated and you have a degree, it's like, which of these 4 job offers are you going to take? And part of the beauty of it is it's not just about the skills. The skills are important, but the character pieces are more important. When companies come, many of the companies will say, I will hire a Williamson guy because if I know I hire somebody of high character that's going to show up and work hard and be a great leader and I can promote to foreman quickly, then I don't care what trade he learned here because I know all your trades are very hands-on but it's the character part that matters to me. And I think sometimes in society, whether it's parents or other people, it's just like we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We want everyone to have a trophy for everything, whether they, deserve it or not, kind of thing. I love our kids because they have a little fire in the belly. They haven't had it easy. And they're not going to complain when they find out that the dorms don't have air conditioning because it's still better than sleeping in a car for a lot of kids. Right. And so, they're gritty, they're tough. And then, they see such an amazing opportunity to completely change the trajectory of their life, to be, somebody that, and that's what's really great, and that's what I love about it. And Williamson provides that opportunity. And that's why I was so excited. I think it was 2017 when Brian first came out, found out about him. He came out and visited and spent a week looking around at what we were doing. And you became convinced that, we can't replicate exactly Williamson, but there's some things about Williamson that we think are really special that we would love to incorporate into our school and so for us, we're excited because we've always said, why Williamson should not be unique in the country. We're the only one in the whole country. There should be schools like this in every big city in the country. And of course, Brian, his Catholic faith and the connection to craftsmanship and I've always said that, like, you go to work and you pound away at a computer all day and you walk away, but there's something special about saying, I built that. I put the bricks together for that. I framed that building. Like I created that. And that feels good. And we should understand that that's good work is good for the soul, and our kids, I think that's part of our thing is when you're a Williamson graduate, it's not so much about how much money you're going to have in your wallet as to say you're going to be a good husband, a good father, a good role model, a good leader in your community and in your church. Those are all things that we expect Williamson men to be when they graduate. And that's what we tell them, like, hey, you don't have to, we're not going to ask you to pay back the $30,000 a year it costs to put you through the school. But your job is to go out there and keep the reputation high. Like whoever you signed on with should be back at the career fair next year saying, I need 10 more guys like that. He's killing it. And the vast majority of our kids, that's the reports that we get from. And that's why the thing keeps growing every year. There's just, even when the economy takes a downturn, people realize that, that the most important resource you're going to have is your people, and you got to get the right people. And so, and that's what we tell people when times get tough and the boss has to lay off a couple people, you want to be the guy that says, I can't do without that guy. I have to keep that guy because he's just such a great employee.
So when I first, when Brian first told me about Harmel, one of the ways that he explained it was Williamson. And when I both heard about Harmel and about Williamson, this light goes off as if to say, like, oh, that's obviously an excellent idea. That's obviously an excellent model. That's obviously meeting some obvious needs, right? That continues to mystify me. The sort of thing you're doing seems like so obvious an approach to so obvious a problem. Why aren't there 49 more Williamsons? What is it about the landscape of education or maybe society more generally that means it's not being done? Like, what's going on with that?
We had people come a couple years ago from Wisconsin that said, we want to build a Williamson in Green Bay. And we said, well, okay, you probably need $500 million, right? Because you got to build the school, you got to employ people, and you got to endow it to a level, because we don't charge tuition, room, and board. It's really interesting. It's a really hard model to replicate that way. We have to have an endowment of a size. The endowment is large enough now to provide about 70% of what we need to run the school each year. For a lot of people, my heartache with it is that we have, like I said, 400 kids that want to come and only room for 100. That's a shame, right? That we have to turn away 300, knowing that we could graduate twice as many, and they still wouldn't have enough to fill all the jobs that they're throwing at.
Yeah.
So
well, even with even if you were to take the sort of the particular financial model away, and obviously that's stupendous. Clearly, that's quite an investment that would need to be made. But even just the approach to, let's train young men in discipline and in skill and character in the trades, even if we funded it a completely different way, even that alone seems so obvious, especially being the needs that there are in the economy for it. Why is not even that much being applied?
Well, I think part of it is, what we're experiencing is people just don't know about us. So the more we can get the word out on the street, there are people that agree that is a great model. I will tell you, though, that there are people that immediately recoil at the idea that we're all male. That they say, "Oh, wait, what's wrong with you? Why do you discriminate against women?" And I always, I said, no, we don't. I don't look at it that way at all. I said, the school for 100 plus years has been all male, but here's what we found. How is it we graduate 75%? One of the factors is that there's a brotherhood that exists. The dynamic is just different. I've had students come in, and I always try to get, when I have time, to be part of these little two people crews. My secretary and I will interview these candidates. And so I always say, why do you want to come to Williamson? Of course, they always have well, I know it's a great school, a great reputation, and blah, blah, blah. And so I just wait, because then well, what else are you going to say? So then they have to ad lib a little bit, right? And I'll never forget, a couple of years, one of the guys just literally kind of kicked back in his chair and he goes, I'm kind of a ladies' man, and it gets me in a lot of trouble, right? And I'm trying not to lie. I'm trying not to do what you're doing. Like, I'm trying not to. I was like, okay. And he goes, like, I think, if I could stay focused on, what I need to be doing and keep that drama, for some other time and place like that I could be more successful that way. And as funny as that is, there's some truth to it. 18 and 19-year-old, kids, young guys, right? I think there's something about that single sex element in education. My wife went to an all women's Catholic college, College of St. Benedict up in Minnesota, right? And I think she valued that experience. And I always go to these conferences and stuff with different presidents, and I always seek out there's a lot of all women's colleges, and I always ask them, do you ever get any pushback on the fact that you're single sex? And they generally say, no. People think that, and I get it, like it's a man's world, all that kind of stuff. So but I think it isn't about that we don't want women here. We have lots of women instructors and dorm managers that are women, and executives that are. It's the fact is, there's something about the connection that these guys come together on, and the vast majority. I'm not saying there's not women that aren't interested in the trades, but there's not a lot. One of our kind of schools out in Lancaster that is a junior college trade-focused school actively recruits women and has a really hard time finding women that are interested in masonry and carpentry and machining and things like that. But that doesn't really have any bearing on it. What we look back to is, there's a lot of research that shows. There was a book a couple of years ago called Boys Adrift by Leonard Sachs. It was an interesting book about why, in a basic premise of why young men are getting their butts kicked by girls these days in almost every way, and it's hard to deny. And did they lose motivation? What is wrong with our young men? They seem to not be as motivated and inspired and competitive and things like that. And there was a bunch of theories as to why, which wasn't important, but we could use that as a summer reading assignment for our staff and faculty. But the last chapter was, okay, if we agree that this is an issue, like what can we do? What things seem to help our young men be successful? And it was like a checklist for Williamson. Small classrooms, hands-on, single sex, residential, values-based, right? All those things were mentioned. And I think when you look at Williamson and you say, so you're taking kids from the lowest quadrant, socioeconomic quadrant, and they're coming here and graduating in a really challenging environment at the rate of 75%. I think part of that is because it's a brother. We talk about it. It's a brotherhood. Like you help that guy. You have things you can contribute. There are days when you're going to be down in the dumps and someone's got to pick you up and say, come on, let's go. And that part of that teamwork and that living closely together in dorms, this bond that these guys have is amazing. I would love to someday have enough resources to build a women's school, right? All women's school. I think there's merit. And co-ed schools are great too, but I think Brian and Ryan, I think that's part of what they took away from this idea of an all male, residential, faith-based curriculum, values-based curriculum, and part of that is the trade that you learn, but the other pieces are really the secret sauce that makes it impactful. And not just to say, oh, we got a problem with the trades. Let's put this guy in a course for 3 weeks, give him a certificate, all done. That's not it. I mean, this is to, again, our guys go on and they start their own companies and they become CEOs and they do. I mean, it's the numbers are small, but it's not a mile wide and an inch deep. It's a couple inches wide, but deep. It's a 1,000-day journey that these guys are on with their brothers, helping each other get through this thing as a class. And the bond that they develop is really a big part of how they keep each other together and they get to the end together.
Hey guys, just a quick interruption to tell you something you already know. Working Man is sponsored by Harmel Academy of the Trades. Did you know that the National Academies expects 3.5 million skilled trades jobs to go unfilled by 2022? Now that is an enormous challenge for our economy, but it's an enormous opportunity for young men starting out in life. At Harmel, we believe the problem is greater than whether or not there's a shortage of skilled tradesmen. There's an even more important shortage, a shortage of understanding about the role work plays and our vocation as sons of God. Harmel Academy of the Trades exists to form the whole man, providing him not only with the skills necessary to meet the widespread need for tradesmen, but also the intellectual, spiritual, and moral strength that allows him to work with excellence. We do this by offering a robust technical curriculum that's married to an innovative humanities curriculum to form the hands, head, and hearts of young men all at once. We do this in the context of a full 2-year residential college experience that includes character formation, life skills training, and a social camaraderie that builds a culture of dedicated, faithful workers and family men. Applications are now being accepted for fall 2020, so if you know a young man looking to be trained in a skilled trade while being formed in the Catholic faith, send him our way at harmelacademy.org. Now, back to the interview. I think a lot of people would listen to you and say, "Oh my goodness, boy, what I would have given to have had an experience, a formation like that." You know what I mean? I mean, what you're describing really is phenomenal. But obviously, that's even amongst the people that come to you, 1 in 4 can. What can you take away from your experience as a military man, as an educator, as a Catholic man, that a working guy would be able to apply wherever they are right now?
I think it's a commitment to show up. Sounds kind of funny, but one of the things in the military that's valued is you got to be there when you're needed, right? We can't be looking around. You got to be reliable, dependable. One of the things growing up Catholic that I always really respected my parents for is that you don't like say, well, maybe we'll get to mass this weekend. You figure out the weekend and say, first thing we do is figure out how we're getting to mass this weekend, and then things kind of go around that. It's the commitment to say it's our obligation to be at mass, and they provided that example for our family, and it's something that has carried through for me and the way we raised our kids. That's the priority. That's the first thing. I've found a really wonderful gospel reflections group out here that meets every Friday. It is guys that get together that are all about our age, that are husbands and fathers, and we say some prayers to go through, and then we look at this coming week's gospel, and we just say, what does that mean to me? What does that mean in my life? But I've always felt that the thing about the Catholic Church that's really special is it's not about a certain preacher or a certain priest. It's about the Holy Eucharist. It's about the miracle that happens, that Christ is there present with us. And I think, so it's about that. It's the sacraments of the church that make it so special and such a gift that we have. And that's not to put down any other religions or any other, Christianity or any other types of, it's just to say it's such an amazing gift. It's taken me a few years to realize that, but I'm realizing it more and more. And I think during this pandemic, to be away from the Eucharist and to not be able to go to Mass and not to receive the Eucharist, maybe for a lot of Catholics that will, strengthen their idea of like, this is pretty special. We might take it for granted a little bit, but the Mass is the center of our whole, faith. So, and what do you look for in a working man? You look for somebody that's reliable, that's dependable, that's committed. I think all those things are part of being a Catholic man, in today's society too. That's the example that we need, right? Is that we're committed to our faith and that we're going to show up. Again, not being judgmental, but to be a real Catholic, you can't be casual. You need to be committed, and you need to be able to show that not only in just what you say, but how you live your life.
Yeah. And the word that comes to mind when you hear you say that is the word integrity, right? In the sense of, when you mentioned sort of like, okay, it's a 3-week certificate course, come in here, knock a few credits out and you're gone. Well, part of the problem with that is that it doesn't address the whole man in the context of his wholeness, right? And if you don't learn to see each of these parts as somehow integral to the whole, in other words, if you don't know how to, what a life of integrity looks like, where everything works together, each part will suffer. Yeah.
And Williamson, right? Faith, integrity, core value. And so I think, and then, we mentioned leadership, and obviously as an officer in the Army, that's job number one in everything you do. But, and you get these great examples of military leaders and Patton and MacArthur and so, but when you really think about it, like probably the best example of a leader that we ever would have is Jesus Christ. And, and what does that mean? Well, so here's a leader that washed the feet of his disciples, right? That it's service, right? It's like, as a true leader, you put your people in front of you, their welfare comes first, and you're a servant to them. And that idea of servant leadership is the best kind of leadership. And so, I think that's all part of it too, is that, those examples that Christ has given us and how to live your life and how to serve others and put others first. And that is another key part of it. Like that's what a leader should be, a humble servant that puts others in front of themselves. And that's what real leadership is about.
Yeah. I imagine that a lot of the guys at Williamson probably aren't used to having a wide variety of strong, say, father figures or leaders around them, and that may be part of why they respond as well as they do. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's really neat is, when you come to work at Williamson, the thing that's most important is to say, like, hey, you got to have a passion for this and to be a mentor and role model for these guys. Everyone, I don't care if you're a security guard or if you're teaching wood, carpentry or math or whatever it is. And that's a huge, huge part of it. And say, like, many of these guys have not had good role models. And so it's not just about how to teach them how to cut a board or to lay a brick or whatever, but it's that they're examples of what they can become. And again, it's all, leadership's all by example. You can talk the talk, but do you walk the walk? And so it's more not what you say, but what example that you're providing for these students.
Yeah. Well, we got one more question for you. Harmel and Williamson, both interested in forming young men, forming them in the trades. That's a very specific aspect. But I think the people listening here, I think there's a lot of people who are listening who are interested in a slightly more general question, which is as we look ahead to forming the next generation of men, be it in the trades or wherever else, what questions should we be asking ourselves? In other words, not what's the answer to doing that, but what should be the question at the forefront of someone's mind when they're seeking to find a way in their own place or their own lives to form the next generation of men? What should that question be?
Listen, I'm this world. It's not about what's here in this world. This world is constantly trying to lead us astray. And if we keep our eye on the prize and we realize that, and that takes work. So you have to develop a prayer life. You have to get to mass. You have to go to adoration. You have to say the rosary, right? We talk about in our prayer group, arming up, which is adoration, rosary, and mass, like that. Those are key parts of developing your spiritual armor, right? So that you can withstand the tests that are going to come, for sure. I just think that's a huge part of it. I always feel sad for people that don't have faith, that don't have a belief in God. And I think what could you possibly, it's got to be a real dark place, right? To recognize it, like, hey, this is all there is. This is it, and how many toys can I accumulate and how much wealth can I, whatever, but it's not, I think for the next generation, it is, if faith is at the top of the list. And I think that understanding of we're only here on this earth for a pretty short amount of time. And the older you get, the more you realize that. And we're given gifts and talents, but God wants us to use those gifts and talents to make the world a better place. And hopefully, right, to go through this whole ordeal and end up in His embrace, right, that in heaven. And hopefully, if we're on track, if we're trying to do that, and then we can bring as many along with us as we can.
Hey, thanks, gang, for tuning in again, and thanks to Mike Rounds for his continued support of Harmel Academy. Listen, if you think what we talked about today is important, providing a place for young men to be trained in character, in their faith, in integrity, in a skilled trade, if you think all that's important, I wonder if you'd help us spread the word about Harmel Academy. We continue to hear from people from all over, and they're happy to hear about what we're doing here, but clearly the work of creating a place like Harmel, you can imagine it requires a lot of advocates and a lot of friends. Mike Rounds is one example of a tremendous friend and advocate, but if you're listening to this podcast right now, you too can be an advocate like that. And there's 3 simple ways you can do it. First, you can help us spread the word online. Share us with friends on Facebook or Twitter, on Instagram. If you spend any time there at all, take 5 seconds and share this podcast or share our website with your friends. Second, if you haven't told your priest or your local high school counselor about us, jot a quick note right now and point them our way. Third, you can take a second, even at this moment, to rate us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us out a lot, and you can do it real quickly, even right now on the device you're using to listen to this. In fact, it's so fast you may even get it done by the time I'm finished with this sentence. As always, thanks for listening, guys, and we will see you next time on Working Man.